See this roof is ajar. I'll put it down. Oh, that'll do. Thanks for tuning in to today's live Q&A. If you've got questions, put it in the comments below. We'll get to answering those. Now, one of the questions that's come in on TikTok is what happens to the capping after they harvest? So let's have a look at this. If you have a look there, the bees have done their amazing work doing their job, collecting the nectar, turning it into honey. And when the moisture content is low enough, they put a wax capping over the top of the cells. So let's see what happens during the harvest process. So what I'm going to do is put this key in here, which is going to do the job of moving the frame parts. So if I turn this to a 90, and we can just do it on half so we can see. Now, this section here now is all harvesting, but we really can't tell any difference. The bees are just standing on top of their capping. But what will happen is once the honey is drained out from beneath their feet, they'll notice that there's no honey underneath and they'll start tearing off that capping, recycling it and using it to rebuild the cells again. So we should just start to see honey coming out. So I've just turned the key again and now we're harvesting this section here. Now this little spot there, it's open, so that little tiny patch wasn't capped. And you can see a slight bit of distortion on the comb surface. The rest of the comb is staying pretty much as the bees made it, while the honey is draining out beneath their feet. You can see the bees are just chilling, doing their thing, still flying in and out the entrance. And the honey is just starting to flow out the back here and into our jar. Oh, I can't wait to taste that. Did you notice the capping was really white, and that's the fresh wax they've made. So they've used the flowers of the spring here to create some more wax. And when they make new wax with their wax glands, it's nice and white and light in colour. Sometimes yellow, sometimes white. When they're recycling wax, it tends to be a little bit more brown in tones because of all the bees' footprints in the hive. If you've got questions, put it in the comments and Trace will read those out as we go. Any questions coming in, Trace?
Yes, so one of the questions is just wondering, when you're harvesting honey, does it, does it hurt the bees in the brood box and in the hive? Do any of them get squished or anything like that?
Okay, so my father and I over a decade of inventing put a lot of attention into that. And we have cells that inside move like this. And what we noticed at first is we needed to make more space, and we made a whole nother patent about it, where what we did is we put a gap here like this, so that if bees do happen to be down the cells, let's say they're not capped and you're harvesting the honey, bees are down the cells, then you're then have a gap here, so the parts move and they come back again. And now this area here is broken, so they can't catch a leg or a wing in those moving parts. So that was a really important part of the invention, because I really wanted it to be an easy way to harvest and as gentle as possible on the bees. And it's definitely a lot more gentle than the conventional method of harvesting. Sorry, we're having a few technical problems here.
Yeah, it was me, sorry. It was hard having my microphones in Callum's pocket.
1 sec, so we didn't quite get the questions coming through. Just 1 sec. So that question, just to say it again, was, do the bees or the brood get squashed in the harvesting process? We put a lot of attention into that, a decade of work and a whole patent. And what we ended up doing was putting gaps between the frame surfaces. So if the bees happen to be down some of the cells while you're harvesting or turning the mechanism, then what happens is the part moves, it comes back, but this little bit here is gone because that was just made of wax. And your bees then can't get a leg or a wing caught in those moving parts that are inside the comb. As far as the brood goes, the brood is down here in the bottom box, and there's an excluder to stop the queen coming up and laying eggs in your honey box. So the brood can't get squashed unless the queen is in the top box, which she shouldn't be. Look at that beautiful honey coming out. It's gorgeous. This is the new flavour of spring coming in. It's much lighter. We've been getting quite dark honey from the winter, and this is just a beautiful light honey. Look at that. So I'm in my bee set today. We're going to be opening a split that we took just over here and having a look at that and checking to see if it's got a laying queen. We checked a couple of weeks ago and we saw there was queen cells, so they should have emerged now, and there should be a mated laying queen, hopefully. So let's have a look. Because I'm walking away, I'm going to cover up this beautiful honey and make sure the bees don't find it. I'm doing that just with a little bit of wax wrap. This is the kind of stuff you use to replace plastic wrap in the kitchen. That's a good replacement there. No way no bees will get in the jar while we're distracted over here pulling a hive apart. If you've got questions, put it in the comments. We'll get to answering those. I'm going to grab my smoker and I'm going to take the hive apart. Now, let's see if the smoker's still going. Got a bit of smoke there. It's nice if it's blowing more smoke than that. Give your hands a little bit of a smoke to mask your smell. If you're new to beekeeping, wear your gloves because it's nice to start off well protected. And as you get used to your bees and stings, then you might experiment with going without gloves. I'm going to blow a bit of smoke in the entrance. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, we don't have our little shelf brackets to clip on the side today. That would be good. Would you be able to get me a couple of shelf brackets?
Sure.
Thanks, Trace. While you think of your questions, we will just give this hive a minute to settle in. It's nice to add some smoke, leave the smoker in front for a minute while the bees just change modes from being more defensive into being more calm. Okay, let's have a look at our honey. It's streaming in still. Good. Beautiful. Can't wait to taste that. I'm just going to take this off so you can see it again. Gorgeous. Gorgeous light colour of springtime here. Can't wait to taste it. I've got this bee veil on. Okay. One trick you can do is to suck honey straight through the bee veil, but I won't give a demonstration of that. Lovely. Cover it up so the bees don't get in there. Now we can start taking apart the hive over here. If you've done up the wing screws, you'll be undoing them first and then taking off the gabled roof. There we go. So this is a split we did 3 or 4 weeks ago. So it'll be really interesting to see whether we have a laying queen in there or not. Now, just grab our little tool, which I left over here. Okay. If you've got questions, then put it in the comments. Trace will read those out live. And here it is in my pocket. Oh no, that's the widgets. We just need the little key to open the hive. Where did I put that? Who knows? We had one this morning. I've lost it already.
Lost it.
Typical, typical. Never mind, we'll carry on.
I'll go and get one, Seeds.
Okay, so under the lid here, is where you put your chisel, and we're just gently prying this off. And it'll be quite interesting to see what the bees have built in the last few weeks. So because there's no excluder, the queen could be on here, so good idea to have a little look first. I'm seeing some drones here, you can see with the big eyes and bigger body there. I'm seeing a lot of workers. I'm not seeing a queen. So what I'm going to do is lean this up against the hive just in case I've missed her. That way the queen could just wander straight back in to the end. There we go. Wow, okay. So first of all, I'm just looking for a frame that we can get out easily. It looks like they haven't built, so I might start there. I'll come around this side so you can see. And I'm just going to start by gently making some space if we can. And lifting one of these frames up. There we go. So that is now coming up. And we can see the beautiful new comb here that they've built. Look at that. Isn't it gorgeous just to be able to stare in at the world of the bees and see what they've built. It's all been built in the last couple of weeks. Look at that. When it's white like that, it's virgin wax, so they're using that wax for the first time without recycling it around the hive. And they've produced that with their wax glands. They've put some nectar in here, they've turned it into honey, and they're already capping it off for stores for later. Beautiful. Wow. So we're going to go through and see if we've got a laying queen. While we're here, I'll just show you how to connect these little shelf brackets on, because they're a handy little frame rest as well. You just screw out enough to click it on, but keep it tight. So let's have a see how that goes. So that's about right, nice and tight there. Sometimes you need to adjust it a few times to get it right, but after a while you get the idea. There it is there. And into position like that. Now that's a nice little frame rest. So what we can do is start resting a few frames on that as we go. Any questions coming in?
Yeah, so Stuart's asking, is it okay to split your hive when there's no queen cells built?
Yes, you can. As long as there's eggs in the split, they can raise their own queen, or perhaps you've purchased in a queen, in which case you'd put that in the hive without the queen. So you can do a walk-away split, which is you make sure there's eggs in both boxes. You don't even need to find the queen. The one without the queen will raise a new one from the eggs by feeding that young larvae royal jelly for its entire 11 days. If they change to plant proteins, which they do on day 3, it'll turn into a worker bee. So same genetics, identical, just what the bee is fed during that first larvae stage will depend whether it'll be a queen or a worker. Look at that. Beautiful.
Nice.
So for those that are tuning in, this is a split we did about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we're just going to have a look and see if we do have a laying queen. So if they don't have a laying queen, then the numbers will dwindle, and that will be the end of the hive. Okay, look at that. Here we've got a mix of fresh wax, the white stuff, and recycled wax, which you can see here is slightly discoloured. Very nice. A lot of honey there, which is typical. Springtime, they're storing a lot of honey on the edge of the hive here. And here we go, next frame. Now we've got enough room to start moving sideways. And we can leave a frame in the box. So this is one of the frames we've grabbed, but all honey. So I'm starting to question as a beekeeper, does this hive have a queen? So we're going to keep looking through the frames. No sign of brood or larvae yet. So this was a brood frame, but they're using it just for honey. So let's put that one over here on the edge and have a look at the next frame. Okay, coming up nice and slow, and there we have brood, yay. Look at that, okay. So we've got a patch of brood there and a patch of brood on the other side. So that's good. A lot of larvae down the cells. Give us a thumbs up if you can see those white grubs down the cells. That's showing us that there must be a laying queen in here. So that's good news. This splits away as a going new hive. Any questions?
Yes, Eda, Mark's on the Gold Coast and bought a 5-frame nuke and put in his new brood box and added the 3 empty frames, so obviously he has an 8-frame box. Just wondering how often should he inspect it? He's on the Gold Coast here in Queensland, just up the road.
So by all means, as much as you like, get in there and have a look and see what they're doing. A nuke is a wonderful way to start, or a split is a wonderful way to start, because the colony is kind of smaller and a bit less daunting to get in there and have a look at. And it'll get you more experienced at doing your brood inspections and you'll be more confident later. So you can get in there every week if you like, but as long as you've identified that they're, if you started with the nuke, then you'll already have a queen and everything. If you're using naturally drawn comb, you'll be getting there a bit often, making sure they're drawing straight until they've finished them. But you don't have to inspect them that often. Here in New South Wales, we have the varroa mite incursion, and it's mandatory to get into your brood and do a mite count with an alcohol wash once in every 16-week period. So the amount of times we have to inspect has increased here. Okay. Removing this, and for new swarms too, you need to do your alcohol wash. So please bear in mind there are some rules to abide by here in New South Wales in order to assist with the varroa mite incursion. Okay, let's have a look at this next frame. So we've got drones here, which is typical for springtime. You've got your worker brood there and your drone brood here. Drones are bigger, so their cells stick out bullet shape here. Give us a thumbs up if you can see that, the difference between worker and drone. Beautiful. Look at that. Good to see. So this hive's away. We'll pretty soon need a super with all of those worker cells emerging into the hive as fluffy new baby bees ready to do their jobs. And one of the first jobs they do is cleaning the cells they came out of and preparing it for some more brood. Okay, here we go. More brood. Lovely. And there's the queen there. My eye was drawn to her by the way she moved, quite different to the other bees if you notice her striding steps. So that's one little tip in queen spotting, is watch for the movement. See how she's quite different, big strides. And often her abdomen isn't striped like that. But that's a pretty new queen because she doesn't have a shiny backplate yet. There's still hairs on her back. So this is the queen they raised when we took the split. So well done, hive, you're away. You've got a mated queen laying. Beautiful. Any questions?
Yeah, Cedar Bain's asking on Insta, can you harvest uncapped honey?
You can, and some chefs have done amazing things with that because the flavour profile is really quite amazing. Lots of floral bursts in it, very tasty. Having said that, it won't keep. So if you do harvest a bit early, let's say you're harvesting this frame here, and you can eat that as honeycomb early too if you want to try it. But if you have a look, you've got ripe honey up here. i.e. they've taken the moisture content down around the 18% range, so that will keep on the shelf, that honey, if it was harvested. But this honey won't, that's in here, because the moisture content is likely too high. But it doesn't stop you trying it, and it is an amazing thing. You'll actually get quite a lot of flavour out of that. This side's got even more unripe honey on it. So if you then harvest your flow frames with unripe honey, you'll notice that it'll be more liquid in your jar. And that would either need to be consumed or kept in the fridge so it doesn't ferment. Okay, but lucky for us, when the bees do reduce that water content down, if you put a lid on that jar so moisture can't get in, that honey will keep an amazing amount of time. They found honey 3,000 years old in the Egyptian tombs that was still good. So that's a pretty dry climate there, so even if the lids didn't seal perfectly, then perhaps the moisture content didn't get above that 18% and it didn't ferment. So honey is an incredible thing, but yes, you can try the unripe honey.
Nice. See, Simon's got a bit of a good question. He's in Adelaide, has 2 hives, a couple of metres apart. Both had new queens from a breeder last year. Now, one hive is really strong, going fantastic, even had to make space in the brood box. The soup is full of bees, there's honey, it's all going on. The second hive has a few bees in the super and only few in the window and no honey. Wondering what the differences could be, and is there anything that Simon could do to sort of help the second hive?
Yes, so genetics plays the major role in that. So if you've got 2 hives side by side, one's doing great, one isn't, then one has a queen that's virile, laying lots of eggs, and one doesn't. So if you want to speed up the process, then you could purchase a queen and then take the old queen away. A day later, put in your new queen. And it'll come in a little queen cage. I think I've got one of them right in my pocket. So it comes in a little queen cage like this. And there'll be a block of candy at the end, the queen in there, and about 5 escort bees. So you can order that in the mail. And how you insert it, let's assume you're taking the old queen away, then what you'll do is you'll come back a day later and just nestle it between the frames like this. So you put it there and you put the lid on. Now it's advisable to keep this little piece up because some of the escort bees inside might die. You don't want them blocking the exit tube or the way out. The bees will chew that candy away and your queen will be released into the hive within a day or 2. And that gives them a little bit of extra time to get used to her pheromone, and they're less likely to kill her as an intruder. So that could be a good thing to do to that second hive, or you could just let them sort it out themselves and see if they come up to speed.
Yeah, great. So Gary's in the US, in New Jersey, and just wondering, how does he split? He's got a medium Langstroth hive and he wants to put it into a flow hive. So he's got a medium box and wanting to put it into a flow hive. Any tips?
Okay, that's interesting. Medium Langstroth hive. So normally the brood boxes are deep like this, but if you're using medium as a brood box, then what you'll probably have is a mismatch between the sizing. So let me think about what you could do there. One is you could just put the frames in and let them build some extra comb off the bottom. So mediums will be just this size frame, so stopping there. So you could just let them naturally hang some more comb off the bottom. But that might get a little bit messy if they connect it down to the bottom of the hive when you go to inspect. So what you may be best off doing is actually getting these frames that come with our hive, chopping out that brood comb just with a knife and using a couple of rubber bands around the frame to hold it in place. The bees will then fill out the rest and away you go with the larger size frames in the deep brood box. And after a while the bees will chew those rubber bands out and kick them out the front of the hive. So it works quite nicely. Some great questions coming in, keep them coming.
Yeah, really good questions. And of course, whenever we do beginner beekeepers, quite a few questions coming in, seeds on starter packs and what hive's the best one to get started with?
Okay, there's another frame of honey. So any of our hives are great to get started. The reason why we offer options is for price point. So there's entry level and then there's all bells and whistles. If you grab our Flow Hive 2, that's most recommended, or Flow Hive 2 Plus, it comes with the bells and whistles with the pest management tray, which will make things just a little bit easier, and also more observation windows, brass details, and so on. And the adjustable hive stand. So all those things just help a bit, but by all means you can go and get our classic or our hybrid and start that way as well. Half of our audience is brand new to beekeeping, so a Flow Hive is a great way to get started. You don't need all of the paraphernalia like the spinning machines and decapping knife and sieving and all of those things. You can basically just jar honey straight out of the hive. So it's simpler to get up and going and get some real produce from your hive. And it's all contained in this one little hive. You don't need to have a processing room or garage full of all of that equipment anymore. Have a look at the honey we're just harvesting here. So while we've been busy beekeeping, this honey's just been draining straight out of this single frame. So we've got 6 frames here, and this honey's just pouring out beautiful light honey of the springtime. Now I've had it covered up because there's a lot of bee activity at the moment. And there was a question earlier about what happens to the capping. Now let's just circle back on that and have a look at that capping. So it's basically stayed where it is and the bees are standing on top of it. There is a little section in here where it's moved, where it wasn't capped in the same way, but mostly it's just stayed as it was. And you can see the bees already chewing away at it. And what they're going to do is recycle and reuse that wax in that area to rebuild the cells, and away they go again. Keep the questions coming.
Great. So it's Bob and Tina in Burnell's Bay in New South Wales. Just wondering, does the virgin queen do an orientation flight before going on her mating flight?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Queens do get lost sometimes, so you can have a fail of a split where the virgin queen actually flies off and never makes it home. So let's hope that she does do an orientation flight before she leaves, so she knows which hive is home and where to come back to. So the answer is yes, we hope so. We hope your queen does, but if she doesn't, then you might end up with a queenless split.
Fantastic. And what's the best way to clean the flow frames after using them for a few years?
Okay, the best way we've found to clean them is a pressure washer. So you can use a cold water pressure washer and blast them and that'll get a lot off. But if you want to take it a step further, then a hot water pressure washer, which you can purchase hot water ones, but they're more expensive, or you can just get a cheap pressure washer, connect it to a hot water service, and then you've got nice hot water. Please don't burn yourself. And that will help melt that wax off and give it a better clean again.
Right.
So set your frames to open position and just line them up against something so they don't get blown away with the pressure washer. Lean them up and just go down the cell rows like this, and all the wax and stuff will flow down and out the trough, so you'd have the trough open while you're doing that. So it's something that people ask after they've been beekeeping for a number of seasons, 5 years or so, and they go, I want to clean these up and make them look better again. Generally the bees look after them inside the hive, but what you can find if you've had time where there's been a slower colony in the hive is that you can get sometimes mildew building up on the edges, and then they might stop using that very window of the hive. So that can be a good reason to clean, or just to get that beautiful view back where you can see the honey better and see in and see what the bees are doing. So that's a good tip there. We are making a video on that, so we can post a link to it soon.
Great, fantastic. Bunya West is asking, has had a founder's hive since 2015, which
Fantastic.
is amazing. Just wondering what changes have been made to the hive since then?
Okay, great to hear. Let us know what your honey has been like. So if you have a look, we've got a few examples down here actually. So if you swing around, this is probably a good spot to view both of them. If you come up here, you've got, this is our original classic. It's not our original. The founder was slightly different. It was made out of western red cedar. This is the hoop pine classic version, but basically one window on the side. You've got your screen bottom board down here, and away you go. And then the flow frames, of course, at the back here. Now, if you spin around and have a look at our Flow Hive 2, what we've done is build in a pest management tray, which is down the bottom here, which you access with these little winglets there. And here, it's very useful for catching hive beetles, and also could be useful for counting varroa mites. You can put some oil in there and catch those pesky hive beetles. So if you have them in your area, super useful. You've also got ventilation control here, where you can turn this up one way and the air goes through the vents, or up the other way, it's blocked off, or you can take the tray out altogether and get maximum ventilation. Then you've got adjustable legs here, which is super handy to get your levels right. And we've built in levels into the base here, and also if you come and have a look around this side, you'll see another level there. So that's super useful for setting up the perfect harvesting angle, and the one at the back is the side-to-side angle for natural comb drawing. Then we've put observation windows both sides so you can look in, and it gives you a helpful view of the bees. So the classic just had one of those. We've also just got brass details on it for the long-lasting handles there. But both the classic and the Flow Hive 2 are a good hive. So it's great to hear. Here we are 8 years later, and you've still got your founding supporter hive.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for kicking in the beginning. It was such a wild start with, I don't know, there was something like 25,000 hives in that first several months, and we had to make them all by Christmas. It was a big push, so hope we got your hive on time. Most people we did.
Hey, when you spun around there, of course, a few people have spotted that little fire that's burning down there, and it's okay, everybody.
It's the cane burning.
It's the cane. I'll get out of the camera.
So most of the sugar cane in the valley below has been converted to macadamias over the years, but there's still two little patches here we can see, and it's a technique of getting rid of all the roughage after, so they can just burn all that away and be left with a clean crop. Okay.
Nice.
More questions?
Yeah, Cedar Mike's in Colorado, and the winters there are getting really cold. Do you recommend putting a cover around the hive to keep it warm at winter?
That is a very debated question in beekeeping. So if you ask 3 beekeepers, you'll get 5 answers on that. And some people say, no, don't wrap your hive. You want the bees to get cold. You want them to bunker down so they can survive the many long months with no nectar. You want them to go into a hibernation mode. But where it's a good idea to insulate, and I think everybody agrees with this, is under the roof. And the reason why that is, that's so your inner cover doesn't get cold, and so you don't get condensation on the top, because you don't want, in an extreme cold environment, water dripping onto your bees. So definitely insulate under the roof, and you can decide whether you want to wrap your hive or not. There's definitely strong debates either way. Condensation on the inside of the hive is actually a good thing because it's their water source. So basically you want condensation to build up on the walls so the bees can use that as water and not on the roof area. And that's why some beekeepers recommend only insulate in the roof cavity, which you can do with some styrofoam from an old box or an old pillow or anything like that. And that'll just add a bit of insulation under the roof. If you've got an opinion on that, chime in, let us know what you do and why.
Fantastic. And Bunya's come back, Seeds, who was asking, it was one of the crowdfunders, and said the honey's been awesome and glad that they could support us right from the very beginning.
Haha, nice one, Bunya.
Yeah.
Okay, so we might start putting this little hive back together. We've seen what we needed to know. We've seen the queen even, and we've seen the laying. So that's fantastic. Now this smoke is just going out, which is typical if you've been yapping and not doing your beekeeping. So I'm just going to add a little bit more fuel to that. I've got a bit in this drum here, a bit of mulch, pine needles, pine cone. Anything really goes to top up your smoker, some dry leaves, and that'll just get that going again eventually. And what I'm going to do is attempt to put it back in the same order that it started. So most of these frames we just moved over, but some of these ones here were in a different order. The reason why we do that is we don't want to push honey up against honey. Let's say this bit was protruding here and it was banging into another bit that was poking out on the other side. Then the bees couldn't service that area and the hive beetles might opportunistically get in there, lay thousands of eggs, and then you've got a problem with hive beetles starting to take over your hive. So keeping that bee space is important if you're going to start mixing around frames, which you can do. You've just got to be mindful of that. You can also see here where this burr cone's broken that joins onto that, so that can be helpful sometimes. The tip there is don't scrape that off, leave it to let you know which goes where. So I'm just adding a tiny bit of smoke to clear the bees away as these end bars go together. And these ones all push together. So there we go, out of the way, little beesies, there we go. Again. A little bit of smoke's helpful. Any more questions?
Yes, a couple of questions coming in, and maybe it's a good time because we've got the sale on at the moment with our 2+ with the free leg kit. The question is, how do you prevent ants from getting into your hive?
That's one thing we didn't talk about. So you can see these ant guards here. Let's go back to the hive we're harvesting on. You can see the ant guards down the bottom, which are part of our Flow Hive 2+, and they are a helpful little thing if you've got an ant invasion. It's not really a problem for your bees, but it's a bit unsightly to have ants all behind your cover and under the roof and so on. Then this is a handy little thing. You screw this up and you put some oil in there or some grease, and that way it creates an ant barrier. Of course it doesn't work if you've got foliage touching the hive, so you'll have to clear that away to get that little barrier working. Clean all the ants out from under the roof, behind the key cover, behind the doors, and do that a few times and your ant problem will go away. Till next time. Okay. So that's a handy little thing with the base that comes with our Flow Hive 2+, and as Trace said, there is a special on that at the moment if you're wanting an excuse to jump in. Often we need an excuse to start a new pursuit or to add to our current pursuit, so there's one going now if you want to jump in. Okay. Getting the bees away again, just putting these frames together now. It's important to squash them together so the bee space is right, leaving any excess space on the edges. Lovely.
Nice one. So this might be a good time. A couple of people are saying, is that the brood box? And also, I guess for beginners, it's like, well, what's the difference between that box and that second box?
Aha. So the brood box is where there's a queen laying eggs, there's young larvae, there's brood, there's pollen stores that they turn into bee bread, there's honey stored on the edges. It's a going little beehive. And then what we do is we come along and we put our flow hive super on top, which is my father and I's invention, and that allows us to harvest honey in this easy way. So down the bottom we're just wood and wax as it's always been. And here we have our flow frames. So this is the flow 6 with 6 flow frames across it, and one of those we're harvesting honey from right now. So there's a lot of bee activity in our apiary at the moment, so I'm covering up that jar, but look at that beautiful jar of honey that's come out. While we've simply just been doing some beekeeping, this hive's been harvesting itself. So that's the difference between the two boxes. If you have a look around in this window, we had some questions earlier about what happens to the wax. The bees are just going about their business. They've hardly noticed it's drained out beneath their feet, but now some of them are starting to chew that wax away because they've realised the honey's drained out, and they're going to go through that repair process, recycle the wax, and the whole process starts again. So basically, honey up top, babies down below. That's the short answer.
That's, yeah, that's what I always think, the nursery's down below.
Excellent.
Oh, nice. Now, Joey, it's another one of those wintering questions for your seeds. Joey's in East Texas, installed a couple of newts in spring, which is the end of April in Texas. They put the flow supers on when they reached about 80%, but at the end of August, they were only about a third capped with honey in the supers. Just wondering, do they leave the supers on for winter, because it doesn't look like there's going to be much more honey this year, or take the supers off?
So that's a great question. There you are in Texas. If you've got specific information about that location, then chime in and help answer. My guess is you could go either way. If you've got multiple boxes and there's enough stores for the bees, then you could take your flow super off, ideally put that into a deep freeze, and then you can put it back on when the time's right and the flowers are out again, right on top of your hive, and they'll just kick off where they left. But equally, if that's all the stores they've got, then you could leave it on the hive and let the bees consume that honey to feed them while they're getting through the long winter. Now, if you are going to do that, you want to remove the excluder. So if we go back to this hive over here, you can see there's a black excluder here. Now, that's a grid that stops the queen from moving from here and laying in your flow frames. But if you're in a long cold winter and the bees are huddling in a ball and they're moving up through the hive to consume honey up here, the queen might be left behind and perish, and then you start the spring with no queen. So if you do nothing else, remove that excluder for the winter time. But it's a debated topic whether to leave the flow box on or take it off. And you could probably go either way. Okay, so let's put these frames back in. They've been very patient with us. This split we did a month ago, they're up and away. Look at all those drones. It's springtime here. They are raising a lot of drones. And they'll be ready to spread the genetics around, which is a nice thing. This is a nice, calm hive. We could do with this, these genetics being spread around to other hives. Okay, as those queens mate. So here we go. Now this, I believe, went over here. So we're trying to put it back in a similar way, and you can see that little bit of burr comb there again is giving me the clue. It's a little tip there as to which frame goes where. I'm just trying not to squish comb against comb. And there it is there too, with that one and that one matching up. And then here's some of the frames we put in, which were just a wooden frame. The bees have done a wonderful job of drawing the comb as they do. I'm a big fan of naturally drawn comb, saves you waxing and wiring, and the bees seem to prefer it a lot more than plastic foundation in the brood box. So we'll put that back in. Look at this beautiful honey before you do that. There's the difference between uncapped honey and capped honey, where they've decided the moisture content is low enough. They've put their wax capping on, like a lid on a preserving jar, and that way it'll keep for later, should they need it. Lucky for us, they often store more than they need, and we can have some too. Any more questions? We've got time for a couple more.
Yes, Eda. Sarah's wondering, why do those frames have to be so close together?
So bee space is super important, so I'm squashing them together for a reason. And that reason is, if you don't, the bees will start building comb in between the frames, and then it's a big mess. So we really recommend pressing the frames together and storing any, leaving any extra space on either side. And that way you've got, well, these frames are 35mm centres, and that's close enough to what they naturally do of about 33mm. And that's their natural comb hanging space. And what that does is allow them to build some comb and then work back to back. So they like about 9mm between comb surfaces, and that's their bee space. So they can work back to back in the cells. And if you go bigger than that, what happens is they start building some random comb in between, and it's a big mess. Okay. Last frame going back in, look at that. Virgin wax, all white with the light colours of springtime coming in. It's probably the privet, which is a weed, just over here. You can see the privet makes a nice honey. Sometimes your weeds are a welcome thing to the bees as they kick off. All of the understory weeds and things. So the bees don't see them as weeds, they see them as yummy flowers. Okay. One last question.
Yes, Eda. Ross is asking, to prevent a hive from swarming, could you just add the super? And if so, at what stage would you do that?
Okay, you certainly can. So because it's springtime, the bees are really building up. We've seen a bunch of brood in here. In the next couple of weeks, we'll add the super to this. And if we don't, as you say, they might swarm. But your question might be, you've got a setup like this one here, where you've got a brood box and a super already, and you're wondering whether you can add another one to prevent swarming. The answer is absolutely. You can add another brood box like we've done here. So we've got a second brood box and then the super on top. So you can go ahead and do that, and that will just alleviate the primary swarm trigger, which is congestion in the hive and not enough room for that queen to lay eggs. So allow a lot of movement of honey will move up, allowing space down the bottom for the queen to lay, and that will certainly reduce the chances of your hive swarming. Other things you can do is take a split like we've done here, or you could get in there and take a lot of the honey away, which will also help. You can take honeycomb from the edges of the brood nest, you can harvest the honey from the flow frames, and that will really help reduce the chances of swarming as well. So all these things are good to do in the springtime. Okay, we've got a bit tight there, as there's a bit of wax build up. So you'll find that the frames will seem loose at first when you first set up your hive, but after a while you appreciate that as things build up their wax and propolis and start getting a bit tighter in the box. But still, if you can, squish them over like that, just really pressing that bee space together as we were talking about earlier. So we're going to put the lid back on now, which is just the inner cover like this. Nice and easy this time, we just plonk it straight on top like that. We'll take off our harvesting shelf brackets, which we've been using as a frame rest, and then the lid can go on top of that. There we go, put them back in our caddy, and this was a nice tight fit, this one. There we go. And you'll notice we haven't painted this box, which is a bit naughty. We really do recommend painting at least the top of the hive, because this gets a lot of weather and you'll find it'll crack and move and things and be letting a lot of water through if you don't give it a good outdoor house coat on top. With the cedar, you can leave it just naked like that. It will go a nice silver colour eventually, but it'll look a bit rubbish in between new and turning into that beautiful silver look that Western Red Cedar can get. If you've got our hoop pine, or our araucaria it's called, it's not really like a pine, then have fun painting it. It really does need outdoor weather protection with good house paints. Here we are back at our jar of honey we've harvested. Look at that beautiful spring flavours coming in. What we're going to do is finish that process. I was right to put the cover on. I could tell the bees were sniffing around a lot at the moment, and that stopped them getting into the jar. So we're just going to brush those bees away, do the swap here, and put that cover in. And I do have a little cloth to clean that up as well. And what we've got is a beautiful jar of honey. Look at that, yum. We'll take that back up to the office and enjoy it. Thanks to the bees. And thanks for watching. Tune in again same time next week. If you do need an excuse to get started in beekeeping, have a look at the special we're running at the moment. If you want a dedicated online course made to take you from square one right through to a deep scientific knowledge, thebeekeeper.org gets rave reviews. It's a course we put together. It's also a fundraiser. Experts from all over the world contributed to it. And now we've planted 1.5 million trees to create literally billions of blossoms for our bees and everything else that needs it. So if you want an online course, thebeekeeper.org is a good one. And grab the special while it's there. Thanks for watching. Let us know what you'd like us to tune in on next week.